Hey, campfire crew, let's get it on. The Whisper, submitted by Ash. I swear the following is completely true. I understand there are many out there that scoff at the paranormal, but I don't have any doubts about it anymore. It happened about 13 years ago. My marriage was a disaster, and we were fighting constantly. The arguing became violent at times, with me throwing some punches at him as well. I learned to protect myself until I'd had enough and divorced him. One night I woke up. I don't know what it was that woke me. I don't know what time it was. All I know is that I awoke and felt this overwhelming fear. I couldn't move, and I know some people call this sleep paralysis. Did I have that? I don't know. I was, however, able to move my eyes, and that's when I saw it. In the right corner of the ceiling, there was a shapeless mass. The color was a deep, bottomless black, and it emitted pure terror. I knew instinctively it did not want my body. It wanted my soul. And I knew if I relinquished this, I would be gone from this world. To where? I don't know, but I sensed it was a very bad place. I am religious, and after lying there, sweating under the bed covers and not moving, I decided to try and protect myself. Protect my soul. I tried to call out to my husband. It did no good, as I could not speak. I honestly didn't think he would help me regardless. I had no faith in him anymore. I tried to avert my gaze from the thing, an attempt to put that out of sight, out of mind adage to good use. It didn't do any good. I was paralyzed from the icy waves of terror that rolled off of this thing. And after a period of time, after failing in my attempts to look away and fall back asleep, I decided there was only one thing left that I could do. I started praying. In my head. I know I said I was religious, but I mean that I believe wholly in God, Jesus Christ, and the Bible. But I haven't been to church in a while, and I only know really two prayers. The Lord's Prayer and the 23rd Psalm. It had been a long time since I had recited them, and even when I first learned them as a child, I had issues remembering the whole verses. So I struggled repeatedly, speaking the lines I could remember in my head, and intermittently adding, "I love you, Jesus," fervently. After a while, I managed to fall back asleep, and I believe that I was exhausted from the experience, and my brain gave into unconsciousness to remove myself from the terrifying event. Fast forward to 5 years later. My boyfriend slept over one night. Eventually, he would become my husband, who I'm still married to. I woke in the middle of the night to find him awake and looking up at the ceiling, in the exact same place I had seen that thing years before. I asked him what he was doing awake, and he said, "Do you see that? That black spot in the corner of the room?" I instantly went on alert. Shit, it apparently had returned. I asked him to describe it to me, and he said he was looking at a black entity, darker and blacker than anything he had ever seen. My husband said it was crouched in the upper corner of the ceiling. It had the outline of a man and no other distinguishable features. He knew it was evil. He felt that in his soul, just as I had all those years ago. I told him about my experience and asked him to pray with me. So we laid in bed in the middle of the night praying to God, asking him to protect us. My husband is Catholic and I'm a Presbyterian. I don't know his prayers, and he says mine differently, but we were on the same page nonetheless. We just laid there reciting what we could remember to ourselves. The next day, my husband said that he'd been trying to get the entity to come down to him, but it wouldn't budge, and I freaked out. Why? He explained that he wanted to fix it, change its ways, force it to leave by creating a confrontation. "You're nuts," I responded in total shock, "and never try to contact that thing. It's evil." He finally agreed to my request, and thank God it never returned. Multiple issues have occurred in that home. Many times while doing the dishes in the kitchen, I would hear my name whispered in my ear, and I would turn, but no one would be there. I would always get a bad feeling when that happened. My daughter, who was 16 years old at the time, also heard my name being whispered in her ear, in different locations throughout the house, and more than once. She also described feeling fearful when it occurs, and my husband has seen this image of a woman floating in the hallway just outside of our bedroom. He would see the outline of her body, no face, and she was completely black. She had her hair in a bonnet and wore colonial garb, and after catching his gaze, she would turn and float away down the hallway. My husband saw her multiple times, and always at night. He never felt frightened, just curious. He also always woke at 3 a.m., almost every single night, as long as we lived in that house. All members of the family have seen a different woman dressed in a white gown floating past one doorway that connects to the front hallway, and no one feels any animosity from this sighting. The house is definitely haunted by a multitude of spirits. Not all good, not all bad. I need to move forward 4 more years. We were now married and about to move into our new home with our kids. Since we were both divorced, we had our children on alternating weekends, and we were lucky. We were able to have our children with us on the same weekends. I'm including that information so you understand my next part. One of the weekends with no kids, we were up in our bedroom on the 2nd floor and had just finished making love. It was about 2 a.m., and I told my husband I was going downstairs to get some water. I was naked and walking around the house without turning the lights on. And after I had some water in my hand, I left the kitchen and I began walking up the stairs to the bedroom. The stairs have 3 steps, a landing, then turn left, and continue with 12 steps up to the 2nd floor. Paralleling the long part of the stairs on the 2nd floor is a banister. As I stepped up to the landing, I turned and began the 2nd part of the staircase. That's when I heard a voice coming from behind me, directly above the landing on the 2nd floor. It said in a clear whisper, "Be careful." I just assumed it was my husband because no one else was in the house. And just as I turned the corner into our bedroom, I said, "Why are you teasing me? What did you mean when you said that?" First thing I noticed was that he was lying in bed with his back turned to me. He said, "What are you talking about? I've been lying here the whole time you were getting water." I immediately began to feel scared. I was panicky, and I explained what had just happened as I quickly ran to my side of the bed. By the time I was in bed in his arms, I was shaking. What the hell had just happened? I was so sure of the voice, the warning, and the feeling that I had just an encounter with something other than this world. My husband believed my encounter with the voice without a question. About a year later, the morning of my 50th birthday party, I fell down the entire flight of stairs. I had slipped on the top step and tumbled down, and I hurt my arm terribly, needing an x-ray to make sure it wasn't broken. It wasn't, but I did need a sling for a few weeks, though. Pulled tendons. While I hadn't thought about it at the time, I've looked back on this event many times since it happened. Was this what the voice had warned me about? Did they know something would happen to me on those stairs? Sometime later, I discovered that a young boy, around 17 years old, had committed suicide in the house 3 weeks before we had bought it. The realtor hadn't told us this, as there is no such law requiring the disclosure of that kind of information. From what I understand, his parents had split up and he was on antidepressants. He had siblings younger than him, and he waited until he was alone in the house to take all of his medication at once. His mom found him on his bed. She'd been out shopping for the day. Was it him that warned me? I'll never know, and I believe he is still here. Everyone in this house has heard footsteps from several people coming up and going down the hallway to my bedroom. In fact, one day as I was getting dressed, I heard footsteps approaching my door and ran for cover. They were approaching my door, but then just stopped. I yelled out, "Hello?" But nobody answered. I was home alone that day, and was sure people had entered the house and were heading to my room. So there I was, crouched behind my bed, furthest from the door, listening to these footsteps. When I heard silence, I went back to the door to check, and needless to say, nobody was there. I don't mind whatever is in this new house that we're in. Whatever it is, it's harmless. I sense no evil or danger. I'm very relieved to have left the other home, though. I wonder if the new residents of that house have ever experienced anything themselves. Guy in My Apartment, submitted by Errol D. I grew up in an apartment in Hell's Kitchen, New York. It was an okay neighborhood, but our apartment was kind of crappy. It was just me and my dad as my parents had split up, and my sister lived with my mom out in Bushwick. Her place was a lot nicer, but I liked living in Manhattan as it was close to my school and all my friends. When I was 14 years old, I came home from school and was going to fix a snack. I had just come in from playing football up the street, and before my snack, I thought I'd take a shower. Now, I have to explain this to you, and it might sound crazy, but our shower was actually in our kitchen. Yeah, I know. It sounds super strange, but that's the way a lot of the apartments were in my neighborhood. Makes it totally awkward when other people are at home, but what are you going to do? So I got into the shower and was listening to a radio that was in the kitchen, just enjoying the hot water and relaxing. It had gotten dark and I didn't turn a light on, so it was even darker inside the apartment. As I was showering, I turned to look at the glass door out into the kitchen and saw a shape walk by. At first I thought maybe I just had soap in my eyes, but then I realized there was no way that it was soap. I called out, "Dad, are you home?" No answer. I reached up to grab my towel, and as I did so, I saw the shape go back towards the front door, right by me. This time there was no doubt about it. There was someone in our apartment. I stood there dripping wet for a good 5 minutes after I heard our front door close before I got out of the shower. I quickly dried off and went to the door and realized that I had locked it, but I noticed that I hadn't put the deadbolt on. I was 100% sure I locked that door because that was one of our biggest rules in the house. So I hit the deadbolt and then called my dad, who was on his way home from work. I told him what happened, and he was really pissed. He asked if the person had taken anything, and I told him I hadn't even checked yet. He told me to go to my room and wait there with the door closed. I knew he was mad at me because he thought I didn't lock the door, but I knew he was also trying to keep me safe. He got home and we both went through the apartment, and nothing was gone. He railed into me about making sure the door was locked, and I told him that I was really sure that I had. Then we had dinner, we hit the sack and put it behind us. He did call our landlord, but it was kind of useless because the landlord actually lived in Miami, Florida. He asked for permission to change the locks just in case. So the following weekend, I was staying with my mom and sister as my dad had some business to take care of, and he dropped me off at my mom's house and then went to wherever errands he had to run and take care of. The next morning, I got a phone call from my dad saying that he had gotten into a fight the night before. I asked him what was going on, and he said that while he was taking a shower the evening before making dinner, some guy had gotten into the apartment and walked by him while he was in the shower. My dad's a big dude and certainly had no qualms about stopping someone inside our apartment. So he got out of the shower totally soaked, confronted the guy who was in my dad's bedroom, and proceeded to get into a huge fistfight. Thankfully, the guy was a lot smaller than my dad, but he did have a knife, and my dad did get cut in a couple of places. He went to a local hospital to get stitched up, but not before the police came and took the guy out. My dad had done a pretty good number on him. It turns out he used to live in our apartment and would come into it all the time when we were home. He would get more and more bold over the time and started coming in obviously when we were home. He never tried to steal anything, and he only said that he just missed the place and was trying to remember the good times he had with his girlfriend there. The cops didn't care about that at all, and obviously he was arrested, and my dad pressed charges about breaking and entering. My dad didn't bother with the landlord at this point because the landlord was supposed to have changed the locks when we moved in the first place. He never did, and this guy still had a key. So my dad went out and replaced the locks on his own, and obviously we didn't have any more issues, and we knew that guy wasn't going to be coming back. But what scares me about all of this is that time when I was home by myself. I mean, there was nothing stopping that guy from busting into the shower and harming me, or for that matter, when he came back with my dad, killing my dad. Goes to show you, you can never be too careful, and regardless of locks, make sure you change your locks whenever you move into a new apartment or house. You never know if the past tenants will have access to not only your apartment, your house, but to your life. Jerks at the Park, submitted by Danny F. and K. I grew up in a town called Rockaway, New Jersey. This happened in the 80s when I was 16 years old. There was this place not too far away called Action Park. Back then it was also known as Traction Park or Class Action Park. There's actually a documentary out there that came out about the place, about how dangerous it was and how many people got hurt there. It was kind of a free-for-all, which made it super fun. Well, sort of. One summer afternoon, my friend Trevor and I decided to go out there and see if we could scam on some girls and just have a good time. One of the things that came out about the park was that there were a number of places that served beer and really didn't check IDs, and everybody kind of got a little fucked up all the time. Not all the time, but sometimes. We did when we went. And this was one of those times. We got there at about 11 in the morning and just kind of walked around, just checking things out. I'm not going to give a full description of the park. You can check it out online. I think it's still open under a different name. But it was kind of just a big water park with a lot of other attractions as well. There were all kinds of things to do along the water slides and stuff, but a lot of people just went there to hang out and drink beers. One of the attractions was this cliff that you could dive off of, and I want to say it was probably 20 feet in the air. It was such a free-for-all and was always like one lifeguard on duty, and people would jump off into this extremely cold water, and others would jump like immediately after them. I mean, people would get smashed in the head or the back or whatever, and it caused a lot of problems. I mean, no matter how many times you could yell, "Don't jump," some asshole always would. So let's get to the scary part of the story. Trevor and I were walking around and met two girls from White Plains. I'll never forget that because that's what they kept saying over and over. They were from White Plains and had never been to Action Park. I'll call them Becky and Stacy, obviously not their real names. We hit it off and we were just getting to know each other and having a good time talking about the stupid things you talk about when you're 16. How much we hated school, how much our parents were assholes, all that kind of stuff. Trevor decided to go and get some beer for us, and of course no one said anything, and he came back with 4 cups for us. We kept talking, had the beer, and decided to go on the water slides. I know, the brilliance. Oh yeah, it did not abound. We did have fun on a couple of the water slides, but again, no one really paid any attention to what the hell was going on. So after one person would go, another person would immediately jump on and usually smash into the other person halfway down, or when they finally got into the big pool at the bottom. We were laughing and having a good time, and then decided to go have another beer. That's when I noticed there were 2 older guys who had been eyeing us up, or, more to the point, eyeing up Becky and Stacy. They came over and started saying all kinds of macho jock shit like, "What are you doing with these 2 scrawny weaklings? Don't you want to be with real men?" At first I thought they were just being funny, but then I realized they were serious. I also realized that even though it was only around noon at this time, they were pretty hammered already. The girls told them that they weren't interested and kept motioning to me and Trevor to get away from them. We did, but not before one of the guys slapped Trevor in the back of the head and said something like, "You're a real asshole," or something like that. Becky told the guy that he was a jerk and to stay away from us. We walked away, and they just stood watching us as we tried to figure out the next place we wanted to go. We decided to go down this go-kart thing. It's kind of something that you sit in, and there's a break between your legs, and you're going downhill on this concrete run. A lot of people got hurt on that ride too, so I was trying to be extra cautious, even though I was feeling a little buzzed. When I got to the bottom, I was the first one down. And who was standing there waiting? Those 2 guys. One of them, bigger than the other one, pointed at me and called me a faggot and told me that if I knew what was good for me, I would take my faggot friend and leave the park. I didn't say anything. I looked over and saw that there was a security guard there, so I felt okay, just knowing that they weren't going to do anything really crazy. Trevor and the girls came down not long after, and I told them what had happened, and the guys had wandered away, but the fact that they had followed us over there was pretty creepy. Trevor said he had to go to the bathroom and went into a nearby rest area, and after about 10 minutes, I was wondering what the hell he was doing. He hadn't come out. I thought maybe he was getting sick or something, so I went inside and saw that the two guys that had been following us were now trying to jam his head into a toilet. There were other people in there, including adults, that didn't do or say anything. They were just going about their business and not thinking anything was wrong. I was not a giant kid by any means. Only around 5'10", pretty stocky, but no match for two guys at once. I went over to one, grabbed him by his arm, and pulled him up off of Trevor. So what the hell is wrong with you guys? Just leave him alone. This somehow finally sparked interest in another guy who was probably in his 30s, who came over to jump in and tell the guys to lay off and knock it off. Yeah, where were you the last 10 minutes, buddy? Trevor got up from his knees and was super embarrassed, and I told him, let's just get out of here and go try to have some more fun. The older guy was still yelling at the two older dudes that had been harassing us, so we made a hasty exit. Becky and Stacy were still there waiting for us, and we didn't really say anything about it because we didn't want Trevor to be embarrassed that he had just been kind of beaten up by those two guys. We just said those two guys were still harassing him. We went and got another beer. To this day, I can't imagine any theme park today that would allow any of this to happen. But like I said, there's a documentary out there about this place. Check it out, called Class Action Park. If you haven't seen it, you should watch it. Back to the story. We decided to go to the cliff area and jump off, as the girls had never done it before, and we were trying to impress them. So, of course, there's a million people there, and they're all jacking around and jumping off and not paying attention to the rules. And as I mentioned, there was only one lifeguard, and he was just kind of leisurely watching what was going on in the water, not doing anything when the rules were being broken. Becky and Stacy went first, screaming all the way. Trevor and I laughed and waited for them to get out of the way. Now, this is the one time that we actually put our hands up. There were other people who wanted to run off the cliff. But I realized that, hey guys, hold up. We really want to wait for other people to get out of the way. We were such heroes. When the coast was clear, we jumped in and figured we would just shoot down to the bottom, come up, find Becky and Stacy. Just as we both got to about the top of the water, though, we both felt massive smashes on our backs. Those two older guys had snuck up behind us, jumped off right after we had, and basically brained us with their feet. I don't know if you've ever had that feeling, but when you're underwater, you're always wanting to get back to the top, and you're using up all of the air in your lungs. So if someone jumps on you, smashes you in the back, it jolts all of the air out of your body, also while pushing you back further under the water. Now, I panicked, but got away and got to the surface, but Trevor wasn't so lucky. The guy who jumped on him had stayed underwater and was holding his legs, keeping him underwater so he couldn't get up for a breath of air. I yelled out, and finally the lifeguard sprang into action to come down to help. He blew a whistle or something to let everyone know they couldn't jump in the water anymore. Trevor eventually got back to the surface and was coughing and spluttering, and the lifeguard helped him to get over to a safer area. During this time, the two guys disappeared. They just got out of the water, but I was so concerned about Trevor and our new friends that I didn't pay attention to where those guys went. Trevor turned out to be okay. We just decided that maybe it was time to call it a day, even though it was only like 2 in the afternoon. My mom wasn't due to pick us up until 5, but we thought we would just avoid the attractions and kind of hang out and relax. Becky and Stacy were super nice about everything and said that they saw everything and that we should tell security what had happened. I kind of pointed out that we were underage and had been drinking, but they didn't care. They walked off and told a security guy what had happened. While they were gone, I looked up and saw the two guys standing about 50 feet away, staring at us. I got a sinking feeling. How messed up is it that you've got a couple of guys who are obviously in their 20s beating up on a couple of 16-year-old and hitting on 16-year-old girls. When they noticed that we saw them, they walked away, and I thought, okay, maybe this is over. Against better judgment, we had another couple beers and went to a picnic area, just hung out and talked to the girls after they got back. They said the security people were going to be on the lookout for the guys. We spent the rest of the afternoon with the girls, but as it got closer to 5, we tried to figure out a way to exchange phone numbers. I mean, yeah, no cell phones, no texting back then. The girls wrote their numbers on a napkin and said they were going to go find their ride as we were going to find my mom. Trevor and I were both pretty bugged out at this point and kept looking over our shoulder, waiting for these guys to do something else. I mean, they had already threatened us. They jumped on us and nearly killed us in the water. I mean, one actually holding Trevor underwater. So we were pretty on edge. My mother had told us to meet at a certain area in the parking lot, and we started to head over there. As we were walking, we heard a voice from behind say, "Hey, you little faggots, where do you think you're going?" Turned around, and of course, it's these two same guys. They were walking at us really fast and had towels in their hands, and it looked like they were holding something. It didn't look like just towels from a swim area. It looked like they had a club or a bat or something in there. There were so many people going into the park at that point in time and others leaving that the commotion was enough for us to kind of try to hide. But we could hear them yelling for us. We hid behind some cars to see if they would walk by us, and they did. Problem is, they circled around and came up from behind us. One of them swung his towel at me and caught me flat on the back, and there was certainly something in that towel. I don't know if it was a can of soda or a bat or what, but it hurt like a son of a bitch. I fell down, and Trevor yelled out for them to get the hell away from us. I heard a laugh as I was trying to pick myself up, and I saw the other guy shove Trevor, who fell back onto a car and cracked his head on the trunk. He fell down on the ground and was kind of out of it, and I think that's when these guys realized that they had gone way too far. They stood there for a minute just watching what was going on, and that's when my dad pulled up, not my mom. My dad had seen what had been happening as he was pulling into the parking area, and he jumped out of the car, grabbed the guy who hit Trevor. And this was the 80s. There wasn't any, "Hey, I'm going to call security." It was time for some private justice. My dad smashed the guy in the face and threw him over the hood of a car. The other guy started yelling, "Hey man, take it easy," and my dad punched him in the face and did the same thing. The two guys got up and ran away, and that's when my dad checked on Trevor and me. He asked what was going on, obviously smelled the beer on our breath, and gave us a death stare and said, "Get in the car and stay there." He went to security and told them what had happened, but not anything else about us. And when he got back to the car, he didn't say a word as he drove us home. I mean, we knew we were in deep shit. Finally, my dad said, "Don't tell your mothers about any of this." And then he kind of smiled, and that was the end of it. It never came up again. We'd gone back to Action Park a number of times, but we never saw those guys again. But man, that was scary. The fact that there's adults hitting on teenage girls and picking on teenage boys. I never saw Becky or Stacy in person again, but I found Becky on Facebook recently, and we chatted about that when the documentary came out. She remembered every event of that day the same way that we did. She's married, I'm married, but it was a fun way to connect. So, to the creepers who are probably now in their late 50s or early 60s, I hope you've grown up, and I hope you haven't raised kids the way your parents raised you. Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode of Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. If you have a true scary story of any nature that you would like to hear narrated on my channel, email it to unclejoshtruescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Make sure that you hit the notification button. And if you would like to, leave a comment below. I try to respond to all of them. Follow me on social media. All the links to that are in the description below as well. Feel free to reach out to me at any time with any questions, and I'm thinking about doing a Q&A coming up pretty soon, as well as a live campfire. I know I keep saying that, but life gets busy. I hope you're all well, and I look forward to hearing from you, and I look forward to the next episode. But until then, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.